The following is the actual text of a speech delivered in December 2005 by Conrad Xi, the vice chairman of China's military commission to top officers and generals. This guy was the head of the defense ministry, I think, up until as late as 2003. I'm just going to read a few quotes. He said, "Comrades, I'm excited today because the large-scale online survey showed us our next generation is quite promising and our party's cause will be carried on. In answering the question, will you shoot at women, children, and prisoners of war, more than 80% of the respondents answered in the affirmative, exceeding our projections." Now, think about this. The head of the defense ministry in China is talking about how they would be willing, 80% of those in their military would be willing to shoot at women, children, and prisoners of war. I'll read on. "Ostensibly, our intention is mainly to figure out what the Chinese people's attitude towards war is." You can see where this is going. He goes on and says, "In reading history, one may ask, will the center of world civilization shift back to China?" This whole speech is about how China can be the dominant player across the world. And he says our Chinese people, he doesn't want to be compared to Nazi Germany because he says our Chinese people are wiser than the Germans because fundamentally our race is superior to theirs. He's more of a racist than Adolf Hitler was. We're destined not to be buried by either heaven or earth, and he's celebrating atheism. The first pressing issue facing us is living space. Our resources are in short supply. The environment, he basically says, is terrible. And he says, and yet China should be entitled to the possession of all the land, including the United States, because they feel like they discovered it first and that they should be colonizing it because they built the western half of the United States. So how would he achieve that? There's been rapid development of modern biological technology, and new bioweapons have been invented one after another. Of course, we've not been idle. In the past years, we have seized the opportunity to master weapons of this kind. He goes on and says, biological weapons are unprecedented in their ruthlessness. But if the Americans do not die, the Chinese have to die. In other words, it's existential. We have to kill Americans. Then he goes on and says this quote, "It is indeed brutal to kill 1 or 200 million Americans, but that is the only path that will secure a Chinese century, a century in which the CCP leads the world." He's directly talking about unleashing a bioweapon on the United States. And we're talking with Frank Gaffney, who led Team B3 that looked at whether or not China unleashed this coronavirus on the world that resulted in 6 million dead and more than 1 million Americans. Frank, what do you think when you hear those words?
Well, the first thing, Kevin, I think I'm struck by is that was a speech, as you indicated, that dates from about 20 years ago. So this isn't, new news. This is something that the Chinese have been beavering away at for years. And in the speech, in addition to the remarks you've mentioned, this fellow, Chi Hao-chen, the defense minister, talks about how Deng Xiaoping, who back in the early 1990s was the general secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, very explicitly tasked the Chinese biological warfare program, which is, by the way, illegal